Coker is a healthcare business podcast from the Coker Group that focuses on solutions to help healthcare organizations effectively navigate the changing healthcare industry landscape. My name is Mark Reibold, and I'm the host of Coffee with Coker. We want to welcome you all to another episode. This is a different type of episode for those that have listened to previous episodes and follow us. We have a series that we've been doing called Vendor Spotlights. These are kind of quick episodes where one of our team members will sit down with a representative from some sort of healthcare industry vendor. A lot of times they're healthcare technology vendors. And these are organizations that we know them, but we don't have any formal relationships with them. We don't have any direct affiliations. Coker does not have any direct affiliations with technology vendors. However, we work a lot in the same circles with them as we're working with our clients on the provider side. A lot of vendors are doing the same. It's important for us to know the vendors, and it's important for us to be familiar with their solutions, particularly on the technology side. And we also like to highlight some of the things that they're doing, maybe some things that they're doing that's different from the rest of the cohort out there. And if you recall, we actually did one of these. The first one we did was with a company called Mogul Smith, which was a healthcare technology vendor. And today we have another one. This one is with dashboardMD, and that is an analytics tool that runs in tandem with a lot of electronic health record systems and provides a wide range of data and reporting analytics for healthcare provider organizations. Actually, Jeffery Daigrepont, who heads up Coker's technology consulting group, sat down with Jose Valero, the CEO of dashboardMD. And they just go through some quick discussion around what dashboardMD does, what it offers. Again, this is not any sort of endorsement or sales pitch. This is simply just kind of getting to know the vendors and the solutions that are out there. And we think it's good information for our audience to have. So we hope this is beneficial. We'd like to hear your feedback. You can always find this episode with all our other episodes at coffeewithcoker.com. And feel free to submit your feedback at feedback@cokergroup.com. Thanks for listening.
All right, Mark, thank you for that introduction. As Mark indicated, we always like to feature industry innovators. And today we have Jose Valero with dashboardMD, all the way up from Miami, where I want to be most of the time.
Right.
But yeah, thank you for making the trip up. And I've known Jose for quite some time now. Very impressive background. Not only is he owner and founder of dashboardMD, he has a computer science background in mathematics. So he's extremely smart at numbers. He actually began his career as a software engineer specialized in healthcare management, has over 20 years of working directly with practices of all sizes and all specialties, billing companies, revenue cycle management, MSOs, delivery networks, etc. And I didn't know this about you, Jose, but you actually founded a software company before that later, Visionary Health, that was later sold to CompuGroup. Is that the same CompuGroup that eventually was sold to A4?
That is the same CompuGroup.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Small world.
Yeah, they still have some of my old employees there, I'm proud to say.
Okay. You learn something every year. And then after that, I take it you went on to continue your work in data warehousing. And I guess that's when you formed dashboardMD, right?
Yeah. So as I, sold that company and went off to take a big, long break, that lasted about a month.
Right.
And
a whole month.
Yeah, a whole month. I got bored, started showing up at the office with a coffee, asking what I can do. And I got involved with a couple of the larger clients, really bringing together reports, data from different databases, aggregating information. And that's where I had my eureka moment. Hey, this is really important and people need it. And as I learned more about data warehousing and the tools therein, I was able to sort of create a sort of a dashboard application. Back in the day, we were really focused on BI, business intelligence. Right. And here we are 12 years later with dashboardMD and clients of all shapes and sizes, as I like to say, leveraging the advanced reporting.
All right. Outstanding. Well, before we get into the interview itself, I always do like to say my little disclaimer, which is Coker has always maintained an arm's length. We have no financial relationships. We don't endorse. So Jose and dashboardMD is strictly here in the context of we do like to highlight innovators, talk about how you guys fit into the industry, your perspective, and then certainly how we leverage technology like dashboardMD to help our clients achieve their goals and objectives. And so one of the things that in preparing for this interview, Jose, data is it's nothing new. I mean, you've obviously had your entire career dealing with databases and data warehouses and obviously started some companies, but it seems like we've been in healthcare in general, just very slow to adopt analytics. Why do you think that is? It's just overwhelming, priorities, cost, maybe the technology is just now catching up. In your opinion, what do you see?
All of the above. Yeah. I mean, healthcare is notoriously slow for adopting new technologies, as you know. And there's just a lot going on in healthcare all the time. It seems like there's changes constantly, right? Declining reimbursement, physician practices have to do more with less or the same resources. They have to document more, see more patients, more compliance, and so on. So it's tough for them to really focus their efforts, I guess, their energies on these new initiatives, new softwares. Right. It's tough enough to implement a full-blown EMR and all the related features. But I think it's becoming more and more a necessity, rather than just a luxury. You really need to leverage that data and make decisions that help guide the direction, especially with value-based care knocking at our door, or I should say already here.
Right. And, one of my observations in that space is that even though the technology's been around for very long, the capabilities or capacity or the expertise, especially in small practices, most physician practices do not have database programmers or analysts or even those subject matter experts. They historically relied on their practice management systems that come with the canned reports that are very limited in nature. They're not relational. They're not very robust and whatnot, which is actually kind of a segue into the next question I had for you, which is, given the popularity and the dependency on data, some people are even saying data is going to become the new currency. How do you see yourself being a little bit different with all these other analytic packages? I can tell you how I think you guys are different, but I'd like to hear from you, and then maybe I'll follow.
Well, I get that question pretty often, as you would imagine. I think the simplest answer is that, most PM EMR systems do a really good job of operational reporting. They can certainly spit out a bunch of reports and a lot of good information. Where they sort of fall short a little bit is providing aggregate or analysis reporting, and not to mention performance-based reporting. How are we performing over time versus a goal or a benchmark? And it's just a different, insightful view when you're looking at data from that perspective. And what it requires is just multiple layers of calculus. A simple example might be the difference between a standard AR aging report that can be run by payer or something like that, or maybe by location broken out by a physician over 30, 60, 90 days and so on, as compared to maybe a report that analyzes performance of collections, where you might compare visits per day worked, or you might compare something like days in AR or days to pay, which gives you a much better insight into how that payer or that plan is performing.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, one of the things that, we see a lot of platforms and a lot of products, but what was really appealing about your platform, the visuals are just really neat to look at. I mean, it's clean, it's easy, you can follow it. You don't have to be a programmer. You can almost walk up to the platform and navigate. A lot of color coding. It shows if they're trending up, trending down. My first reaction is that someone with little to no experience could use this platform, as well as be able to respond and use it in a meaningful way. I think a lot of systems I see on the market, they're very capable, very powerful, but they still haven't quite figured out how to scale it down to the basic user, or in some case, a physician owner, a doctor who just wants to better understand, have better visibility. And I always got the sense that you put a lot of thought into that design for the end user. You must have been thinking back from your other days that your customer is not going to be ones that have a lot of advanced analytic skills. Was that part of that design?
100%. Actually, so we didn't set out to replace Cognos or Tableau or some of the great reporting tools that are out there. What we wanted to do was create sort of a plug and play approach where we could deliver a layer of reporting that was focused on performance, on analysis, was easy to set up, and pulls the data automatically, about as automatically as possible. In fact, we pull data nightly.
Okay, absolutely. That's great. That's actually a great segue into the third question, which was just kind of how do you fit in with the vendors who are already installed? I know from our past conversations, you guys are very vendor agnostic. You'll work with anyone who will work with you. It's easy to have interoperability with you. You actually set up a lot of that and do a lot of the ingesting of the data. But I know there are vendors who have their own packages, their own reporting. I know, for example, Azalea down the street from us, they endorse your product. There are other vendors who do so. So where do you, I assume you can go direct, or there may be instances where you already have a relationship with an existing vendor who's there?
Well, yeah. So we're mapped to about 36 or so different systems, certainly all the big popular names. And we are formal partners with a lot of vendors like Azalea. And the way we approach it is really we get data in multiple ways, and we can interface data from multiple systems, certainly multiple locations, multiple databases. And what you end up with is an enterprise data warehouse, a data repository that gives you sort of pre-calculated analytics across the board.
Right. And
whether you're rolling up multiple practices or multiple specialties or carving those out accordingly, it's a one-stop shop. And, the technology pretty typically involves us either doing queries directly to the database or having data pushed to us if it's a hosted system. And, now with some of the new standardized files like CCDA and CCD and so on, we're able to pull even clinical data more easily. Right. And most recently, we've actually been working with payer data to augment the patient.
So this really isn't taking the place of an existing reporting package. It might be enhancing it, but also it sounds like you can ingest data from multiple sources. So let's say it's a practice with a single fully integrated, I'll just pick a name, Greenway or NextGen. They may also have outside lab. They may have payer data. They may be part of an ACO. They may have an ASC somewhere. This one platform can ingest all the data from an enterprise level and report off of it that way. Is that another advantage of having something that can work with multiple vendors?
Yeah, sure. Actually, that situation sounds like fun for us.
Right. Okay.
We do that. We work with an ACO that's got about 12 different systems that we roll up. And each one has a little bit different interface, but the end result is that we pull that data nightly, and they can report across it.
Okay. Well, I know a little bit, leading into the next question, and this is the one that we try not to put people on the spot because every situation could be different. There's all kinds of arrangements with respect to how you contract with a particular group. But my observation is that pricing for these services are all over the place. From what I recall from previous conversations, you guys are pretty straightforward. It's a typical subscription fee they pay, not a lot of startup costs. Do you have any sense of what kind of return on investment, how long? I assume something like this could eliminate a lot of the manual reporting cost and labor that goes into that. There might even be other reporting packages that they have it could take the place of. But what are you typically seeing as far as that return? I mean, that's always the question I get from our clients. Well, when can I expect the payback?
Well, first of all, I always like to say that you're going to be very surprised at our pricing, at how reasonable it is, because a lot of these systems are pretty pricey, to say the least. Our model's a little different. First of all, it's all hosted. It's all very turnkey. We include unlimited training and support, so we don't nickel and dime. And what we try to do is really focus in on maybe the initial scope of the work and price it at a fixed fee for all the historical data as well. And then we have a subscription fee going forward, but it's all covered. And I think the key ROI, the return on investment, is going to be time saved. That's probably the number one thing that's the easiest to calculate.
Right.
Most practices spend a ton of time manually producing reports in something like Excel. or other third-party reporting packages. And their monthly reports are sort of a nightmare, or they never look forward to it, let's just say. And we try to automate those reports just as a starting point. But also, there's all sorts of time saved with regards to ongoing one-off reporting. Or how about when you need to look around the data, maybe you're analyzing a particular scenario or on a hunch, and it takes a lot of time. There's a lot of data that you have to manipulate and pull together. Whereas in our system, you should be able to click through some of those scenarios and quickly assess or at least carve out the information you're looking for. Lastly, very importantly, is performance improvement. So it's well understood that when you put actionable information in front of providers and staff on a regular basis, you drive improvement. You really want to show them how they're doing relative to some goals, some corporate strategies. And it tends to drive improvement in all areas like scheduling analytics, improving on no-show rates, improving on E&M coding, certainly AR and denial management, and clinical quality as well.
Right. Okay. Nice. And just a general opinion on this one. What do you see as the market size? I mean, obviously, everyone's trying to get their head around this and get access to data. You guys staying fairly busy? Are you seeing an increase of interest at this point? Where do you see the market?
I think healthcare in general, and probably this market as well, is more like the turtle rather than the hare. So it's a slow, steady growth. As more folks adopt these technologies, they become more commonplace. We're working with lots of prestigious practices, everything from 100, 200 doc multi-specialty groups, all in one system, to academic facilities that are rolling up multiple systems with 1,000 docs. And single docs and small groups and everything in between. And I think that across the board, the industry is starting to really adopt these technologies. I mean, I think I read recently where BCC Research projected healthcare analytics market to reach about 14 to 15 billion by the year 2022. Wow. And it's been growing at a 15% rate. And like I said, I think it's slow and steady. I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm just as busy, if not busier than ever.
Sure. I know last time we met, I think it was at HIMSS a few months ago. You were telling me about some really cool things that you guys were doing as far as your roadmap goes. Can you expand? I won't steal your thunder, but can you expand on what you were describing to me? It had something to do with some risk scoring, something that sounded extremely interesting. But
that's all the fun stuff, right? So we've been doing a lot in the population health arena. We started with gathering clinical data and being able to carve out the clinical quality metrics. And then we became a CMS approved registry, and we got involved with MIPS filing. And as we work closer and closer with our clients, we've learned the value of creating customized quality measures that tie back to workflow, clinical workflow specifically. And now we're pretty heavily involved in risk and cost management, and specifically calculating risk and carving out patients into 3 or 4 different risk buckets, as we call them, low risk, rising risk, and high risk. And what that does is it enables a practice to target these patients very specifically with a care team that, for a high risk set of patients, obviously it's going to be a little bit more intense. They're going to be on them constantly. But where the real cost savings is in the rising risk. Right. We don't want those folks to get into high risk. We want them to stay there or back off into low risk. And with this whole risk scoring and including payer data to the population health tools, really, really making a big difference for some of these larger practices. Yeah. And related associations like CINs, clinically integrated networks, or ACOs.
Okay. The next question, I think we kind of touched on it, but this is definitely in the top 3 of the questions I get asked the most about products like dashboardMD is just exactly how hard is it to interface and pull data. I think you mentioned or referenced a large number of vendors you already interface to. So I'm going to assume that if you've done it already, it's not difficult. You kind of follow the same pathways that you've done already. But when you approach a new customer, what is the typical approach? Because that's an area of interest that a lot of customers are concerned over. Is it going to be difficult to pull their data?
Sure. And is it going to be accurate, right? It's the most important thing. Well, look, the first question we ask is, have we already interfaced with the vendor software system and that particular version? And so if we have, we got a leg up, and a lot of times it's pretty turnkey. If we haven't interfaced, we have a whole team that works on this all the time, and they can work with HL7 fire type interfacing, where you've got more of an API type model. As I said before, we can pull CCDA files or text files. We have our own format if the vendor can push files to us. So there's a few ways that we can make it happen. But the end result is that we're pulling data, and computers do pretty well at copying data, and we pull data every night, and we do a extensive quality control and quality assurance on that data, especially with a brand new mapping. And once we make sure that everything's tying off to the penny, quite literally, after that, it gets easier and easier to plug in any number of sites.
Right. Well, again, sticking on my top 3 most common questions that I get asked is what kind of timeline, and give me a sense of what implementation looks like. That's always important too. Yeah.
So we say about 4 to 6 weeks for a mapping that's already available. If not, it could be longer. And then you're looking at probably more something in the order of more like maybe 4 to 6 months, because you really got to work to perfect that mapping. Sure. The implementation starts with a installation call. We usually talk to the IT folks about the installation requirements. We do sort of a pre-install call rather, and then we do the installation. It's installed from the web. It's a Windows service, a small piece of software. It's not anything too complicated, but it does install with a set of data tables that are basically data-driven mapping queries.
Okay.
Once that's all installed, it's configured to run at a certain time in the evening or the wee hours of the morning, right? So that we can get that data during off-peak hours. And that information is processed. First thing we do is process all the historical data and send it up to the servers, and then we generate the data warehouse. After that, we go into this quality assurance review where we compare the results or the reports rather between the PM and EMR directly to dashboardMD. And once we're confident that they're tying off to the penny and we've got very high accuracy, then we go into a training mode. And at that point, it really becomes more of a one-on-one.
Sure.
With the practice. We'll grab a few folks that are mostly interested in ad hoc or on-the-fly analysis. They learn that part of the tool. Others, like executives, might be interested in more of a scorecard type turnkey dashboard. We'll set those up. And then, of course, we look to automate reports where we can.
Okay. Well, I know we touched on this a little bit before about this being one of the barriers about just people being intimidated in general about dealing with analytics. It's heretofore has been a kind of a complicated thing for most people. The skills have always been required pretty high. What do you guys do specifically to maybe help someone who's never been around analytics before get comfortable? Because you want this to be kind of a self-serving, a lot of individuals' ability to interact with it. How do you help overcome that fear?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. And that's a real challenge there. We tend to bump into 2 types of folks, right? There's a group of folks that already do all of this, but they're doing it manually. When they first see our application, they're enthralled. They really get it. They can't wait to use it. And they really hit the ground running. Then there are folks that don't really do this stuff too often because they don't have the time, right? And they don't have the tools, but they're asking the really good questions. With that group, we really sit down and we teach them how to use the tool, right? We teach them how to push the buttons and what everything does. But more importantly, we ask them questions about what they're looking for. And we end up spending a little bit more quality time really discussing what they want to track. Sometimes they're focused on productivity. Often it's AR, good old-fashioned AR and denials, and looking at more of a performance view of that, not just a list of open claims. And oftentimes it might be scheduling or maybe even patient demographics, looking at carving out patients by zip code or demographic data, something like that. But we like to really sit with them and sort of personalize how they work with the system.
Right. Okay. Well, and we've been asking you a lot of questions about how you approach things. What questions do you normally ask a particular client when you're scoping to figure out if it is a right fit? What are you asking them to see if they would even benefit from?
Yeah, that's easy. I first thing I ask them is, are they spending too much time manually producing reports?
Right.
Are they asking questions about performance that reports can't answer?
Gotcha. That seems pretty straightforward. Yeah. So Jose, one question that I've been thinking of, and I just want to be careful how I word this one. There's a lot of vendors in the market who are, for whatever reason, they're becoming commercially discontinued. They may be end of life. They may get bought by one practice or one vendor buys them, they merge. But for whatever reason, there could be an installed product, and out of nowhere, that system has to be uninstalled and replaced with someone else. When that happens, there's a lot of disruption to the practice. There's a lot of continuity issues. There's retraining, resystem. I'm going to assume that doesn't mean that your relationship has to end, or because you work with so many different vendors. But at the same time, you could be partnered with the vendor leaving and the vendor coming in. How do you help a client in that situation? Because those are usually very disruptive situations. What's your company's position on partnered with two of the same vendors, the one that's leaving, the one that's coming in?
Yeah, well, that actually brings up a situation where we could be a tremendous help to some of these sites, especially when they're going through the transition from one system to another. So we provide a continuity of analysis. We're going to pull the data from system A and system B at the same time while you burn down maybe system A and change over to system B full time. Might be a 6-month process and maybe even up to a year. But we'll continue to pull both systems and combine them so you can get combined enterprise reporting. You just never miss a beat. And once you do, sunset system A, if you will, we will just do one final pull of the data, and that will stay in your data warehouse going forward.
Okay, yeah, that's quite interesting. Just a quick follow up to that. If they wanted to keep a copy of the old system's data, is there the ability to do that? I mean, I don't think you're an archiving company, but there wouldn't be any reason why that last company's data couldn't live in that repository, would there be?
No, not at all. On the contrary, we recommend it.
Okay. Well, that's great. The last question I have, which is one of the things that we even struggle with our services oftentimes, is we can lead, as they say, you can lead the horse to water, right? So you provide the technology, it stood up, you've done the training. I still think that people, by and large, will struggle with how to then take that information, convert it into meaningful action items. How do they implement? Where do they intervene? How do they prioritize? And I don't necessarily think this is a lack of not having the information. It could be a lack of time, all the other priorities that they struggle to deal with, to keep up with, the compliance. Sometimes you may have data, but what does it mean? What's the root cause to it? Do you guys ever circle back and assist them with how to actually take the information and then turn it into something meaningful to actually act on it and implement from it?
Yeah, Jeffrey, what a great point. We do it all the time. There are practices and organizations that have folks that specialize in this, right? Mm-hmm. And they're looking at performance improvement initiatives, and they're looking at them as sort of part of their job. And then there's everyone else. And there are lots of practices out there that don't have the resources to have folks sitting around just doing this. And so we really try to step up a little bit and guide them, and we're very consultative throughout the entire process of implementing the system and training and sending them in the right directions. And the system itself will highlight in red certain areas that are underperforming. We do pre-install it with a lot of good industry benchmarks. But we do see this challenge out there, and we try to address it with folks like you guys, where we have partners, consultants that can go in and really help out the practice, help them put this to work for them. One thing is to sort of be able to report on a particular area, and maybe even have some findings about that, and maybe even hear some recommendations about what you should do. Now you have to implement and actually put a plan in place and execute and monitor that. So, a lot of times, most times, in fact, it's not just any one thing that you're going to fix and everything is back and perfect. A lot of times it's going to be something that's ongoing. It's a process change, and you've got to monitor the results to make sure that they stick with the new process and that it does indeed improve.
Right.
We look for guys like you and your team to really help us with that.
That we're very excited about analytics in general is that, the traditional way of doing an assessment requires an extensive amount of auditing, information gathering, using stated information. It may not always be entirely accurate. Sometimes you're getting information secondhand. And the worst part of all that is it requires a lot of travel sometimes, a lot of phone calls. And unfortunately, that causes fees and costs to run up. I think something like this is much more economical, and both from the information gathering standpoint, but more importantly, it allows companies like ours to help our clients with early intervention, monitoring, helping them avoid, and then more importantly, respond and react to it. We're a big believer. Our culture is to transfer the knowledge and the information and help our clients be self-sustaining. The last thing we want to do is be on someone's payroll. So I think in cases where we could add value by modernizing our methods of helping people and getting more cost effective, I truly see that as a win-win. And of course, like you, we're vendor agnostic, so we can work within their current systems or other products. But it's nice to know that there are companies like you that are currently innovative as well as leading in this area. And just a personal opinion here at this point, I candidly don't see how organizations will stay financially viable if they don't have a good understanding of their data. It truly is going to become the new currency. And I think the matter of either surviving or not surviving will depend on their ability to use data, both in terms of contracting, and we haven't even really gotten into the consumer side of this yet, or direct employer. But you're no longer be able to go to meetings with emotions. You're going to have facts and data. And I think the payers are also way ahead of us in healthcare on their data and the ability to analyze and profile. So doctors and hospitals are going to need to get caught up real quick. So with that, Jose, thank you very much for flying up, and you brought a little sunshine with you. So maybe the next we have to bring the studio to Florida and do the next one there. So
that sounds good. Well, it's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And a final comment: we do these podcasts all the time, but we never thank Jessica, the person that's Jessica Combs. She's literally running the controls. That's where the magic happens. So I hope you enjoy these. If there's any feedback that you'd like to give us, other topics, if you have an interesting story that you feel like you need to get told, we're always looking for new subject matter experts. I call them victims. We love to have you here in the studio to put you in the hot seat for 20, 30 minutes. But yeah, definitely give us feedback. And Jessica, thanks for all that you do. We couldn't do this without you. So thanks, everyone.